Hello, everyone. This is the return of the Then and Now podcast, Point of Interest videos. I am one of your co-hosts, ASMR Diesel. To the left of me, I have Lelouch V. To the right of me, I have Professor E. King of the Comics, Ethan Murphy. So, fellas, today the conversation topic at hand is that of McGuffins. Resident writing savant, Professor E, would you do us a favor and give the audience an explanation of what a MacGuffin is for anyone that may not be aware?
Right on. So a McGuffin, quote unquote, is like an object or device in a movie or a story that serves merely as a plot device to string the audience along and keep them interested, even though they themselves won't even necessarily know the significance of said object. There are several examples of said MacGuffin, but the original one was actually in a Hitchcock film where the McGuffin was more or less plans that they were looking after, which is why it's named McGuffin.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind when I think of that, it was what was that movie that came out a few years ago with all the assassins in Common and Alicia Keys?
21 Smoking Aces.
Smoking Aces.
Oh god.
And Eddie Israel.
Alicia Keys in Common?
Mm-hmm. They actually were kind of not, I think she was gay, but they still had love interest of those two as well.
That sounds.
There was like one in that movie.
No, Taraji P. Henson was gay for Alicia Keys, but Alicia Keys was kind of into Common. That's what it was. By the way, Taraji P. Henson's in that movie too.
Yeah.
We digress.
Yeah. Ethan, do you want to give the audience a probably more pop culture example of a MacGuffin, just to kind of give everybody an idea of what one is, in case they aren't aware?
One of the age-old ones that we go to a lot these days, pretty much everyone knows, especially you two, in Star Wars Episode 4, the battle plans that R2-D2 is carrying, those are technically MacGuffin, because the audience doesn't really know what they are when the movie first starts. We don't know where they are until like near the end, more or less. The idea is just that it's something important that R2-D2 has, and he's trying to get to Ben Kenobi or Obi-Wan Kenobi with them. And the thing is, it doesn't matter what they are. All we know is we're invested in seeing this little droid get from point A to point B.
So that being said, to characterize a MacGuffin, would you just say it's just is this something that has some kind of substantial value to somebody or multiple people? And you can know the details of what that thing is later on, but do you feel like it kind of takes away from the MacGuffin in general when you learn the details of that thing?
It definitely can. We were talking about it earlier on the show. One of the best MacGuffins in recent years was from Pulp Fiction. What's in the case? It's Marcellus Wallace's case, but what's actually in it, we don't know. The characters obviously do, and it's obviously very, very valuable to him, but we have no idea what it is. Now, but 20 some odd years later, if we found out what it was, it could only disappoint us, more or less. So knowing what it actually is can only set yourself up for disappointment. If you go back to even, for example, Wolverine in the comic books for several decades, we had no idea about the full story of his full backstory, right? And then they said, you know what? In like, was it early 2000s, fam, or late 90s? I think it was early 2000s. They finally said, okay, let's go ahead and give him the story. Let's actually go and give him his story. Yeah. And we got to James Howlett, and it was like, oh no, it pretty much only disappointed us. The intrigue, the mystery was so much better than actually knowing the exact answers.
Okay, so it's more than just like a direct object. It can be like a certain thing that has a mystique to it that everybody wants to know, but no one actually does, like Kakashi's face in Naruto.
I would say that's a MacGuffin as well. I would say it's a MacGuffin, yeah. It's the idea is oftentimes what happens, things will get built up and kind of build a mystique around them, and a careful storyteller will be like, okay, it's better if I can tell this story without having to have this detail filled in. Letting the audience's imagination filled in would be that much better in a sense. So let's go that way. This is something Otis knows. In the book that I wrote, in Slade and Ash, remember the blonde bastard? The guy that assassin? So that dude actually has a name. In the script, his name is there plain as day. He's not called the blonde bastard in the script. However, I was like, you know what? Saying his actual name would only make him seem like that much more of a, nobody. So I decided not to ever say his actual name. So there are certain times that happens.
It's interesting. It seems like a creative lazy writing. It's not lazy in the sense of like lack of effort, but it's like you're introducing this whole plot point and plot device, and you give it no characterization outside of the fact we know it's desirable by other characters, but that also makes it good, which is kind of weird to me. It's a very unique thing.
It's done also. J.J. Abrams, the guy who did episode 7 of Star Wars and episode 9, he also did Mission Impossible 3. He's done a bunch of stuff. He had a device called the Mystery Box. I'm sure you guys have heard about this before, where he deliberately tried to create a mystery, create all kinds of ambiance, and make something seem very ominous about some device or whatnot in a story. And he would deliberately not have the details there. He wouldn't even write the details himself. He wouldn't know what it is. And he was trying to make it so mysterious that the audience would be engaged into it. The problem with that is that you try to build a story around something where it doesn't make sense because you have no idea what it actually is. And is that pivotal to the story? It can become a problem. So like you said, Charlie, it can become lazy. If it's lazy, if the writers or storytellers have no idea what they're doing because of the said object.
Now, that being said, do you feel like a McGuffin should have like a certain time span for how long it's unknown? Or what is a time period that a McGuffin has to where it qualifies as that? Like if I just have some item and you don't know what it is and I reveal to you what it is 2 seconds later, obviously it doesn't count, correct?
Right. My first thought went to, probably Otis can back me up on this, was from the Avengers films when you have Loki's staff and they reveal that within his staff there's obviously one of the stones. They call them stones right now in the MCU. But they so and the thing is, the regular audiences didn't know what these things did. We just know that they were important, they were powerful. We had no idea what they actually did. And then later on down the road in the movies, years later, we found out how powerful they actually were and how they actually practically used. Right. They were, even though the stones in and of themselves are just called stones, infinity stones, whatnot, we didn't see what they could actually do until more or less like, I guess, Infinity War, really. You kind of saw some flex of power like in Guardians of the Galaxy or whatnot, but they weren't really shown as a threat until much later on down the road. But the audience, we were still invested in them because we saw how many people were going after them, and we kind of had the promise of the premise in that we knew someday, somehow, we'd see what these things were. So you were strung on for years, for several movies, but we still were there. If that answers your question.
Would in like Harry Potter, would he who must not be named can be considered a McGuffin?
Yes. Kind of. The thing about it was he was very important from the start, even though you didn't know his name. His name itself is a bit of a McGuffin, but the character is more substantial. Even in the first movie or first story, he's on the back of the head of old boy. So it's kind of like he's always around. He's too important to be nothing. His name may be more of a McGuffin than the character himself. I may be a little off, but that's what I'd say.
Because even in that first movie, you know all the details of what he's done to make him that bad of a person. You just don't know his name. So does that technically, does that count technically if you know the details but just don't know the title?
The name might be essentially. Because when do they reveal his name? Like fourth
in
movie?
Chamber of Secrets.
The third. Oh, so that's the next book, isn't it?
The
second book, Chamber of Secrets. So I think, in the first movie or first book, so here's the thing. When that first book and first movie came out, we didn't know that, when the first book came out, we didn't know there'd be a second one to kind of fill in the gap. So that was a McGuffin. As far as he who should not be named, his name was in fact a McGuffin. Yeah, so that's a good example.
Yeah, I didn't mean like Voldemort as a whole. I mean like specifically, he must not be his name. Yeah. I should have said that's better.
That's a good example. Yeah, I agree.
Which I want to rewatch that second movie again. That was really good to me. Do you guys have any other like closing remarks on this one to me isn't very difficult to kind of break down because I think everything with this is pretty straightforward. Are there any other details around McGuffins you guys want to get into, or is this kind of an easier toss up?
I think that they can, if used properly, they're a lot of fun. And you said they're lazy or whatnot with writing. You can have it that it simplifies things. These characters are going after this object. The end. One of my favorite films of all time is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. They're going after the Holy Grail. And we don't really understand or know the details as to why at first, but it's something they all want to go after that seems very important. They're willing to die for this item. That's enough to get us incentivized or, kind of invested in the movie. Same thing as Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's having an object that people are going after can get the plot going and get the characters as well as the audience invested in it, regardless of what it actually is. As simple as that. So I think if you use it properly.
Yeah, I think this is another common thing that anime has done a lot too. The One Piece, I think, with technically
Jesus,
the Philosopher's Stone in Full Metal, the Holy Grail in Fate Stay Night. It's a commonly used thing to have anime character have a singular motivation to a thing that we don't even fully know what that is yet. So now, having a name for that term, I'm glad to have it.
So a thought I had about that in general, because we went back to anime, with something like the Geass from Code Geass, for example, where it's an item that Lelouch has, and he knows how to use the power through trial and error, but you do not know the details of what that thing is until substantially later on in the story. Would that technically count? Because you know what it is, and I don't think, does he even know what it's actually called for a good bit? Like, I don't think he calls it the actual Geass until some point later in the story.
She tells him.
No, C2 calls it a Geass in the first episode.
She tells him pretty cool. Yeah. I wouldn't quite call that one. I mean,
and even then, you still don't know the details of like what it is or how it got there, or you see why it has value because he's using it, but you don't know any details about it outside of what it is and what it does, to an extent of, at least to the capabilities of what the characters use it for.
I guess on some level that it's kind of one, but it is defined in some sense as to what it actually can do. We see it being used, and there's still mystery around it. Yes, as far as, because it definitely gets explained later on in the series, the full capability and everything. But there's enough light shown on it from very early on that it's not too much of a mystery box. So
what about another example being like the all for one or one for all abilities, where you know what it is generically, but you're learning. Like if you're given this thing and you know what it is, but the capabilities of it and the actual depth of what it is not known to you, and it's delivered later on, and like it's given even more greater impact because you're getting more and more details about it. So it seems it's already valuable as it is, but it's getting more and more valuable as the narrative goes on. Does that? I don't know if it does. I don't know if it technically counts at that point.
Not quite. I see what you're going for with the one for all, or all for one. I guess both in a way.
Either or.
But they are essentially, it's a power, like the way in the second episode of this, where All Might explains it to Deku, as far as this is a power passed down from several users over the years. It's kind of like, well, that's setting it up, and then you do actually see, oh, by the way, this power displays itself in the user differently. So it's kind of like there's not too much ambiguity there. If All Might had said, I'm going after all for one to get the one for all power, it's like what is that? And Deku's like, what is that? And All Might said, don't worry about it, it's just a very powerful thing I need to get. And we never knew what one for all actually could do or what it was. Then it would be I would say much more of a McGuffin.
Okay.
I think the best example we've said all day is definitely the One Piece, because I think they did on some level kind of. I know it's a treasure. I know it's obviously Jolly Roger's treasure. Okay, they still okay.
I don't know. Yeah,
we don't know. To this day, we don't know we don't know if it's a treasure, if it's a place, if it is an idea.